Hello, brothers of the camp. Today's patriotic construction is going to be about George W. Vaughn, and it takes place largely within the bounds of Harrison County, Indiana. Born the fourth child of Louis A. and Hannah Applegate Vaughn in May of 1846, his parents were both born in Virginia, Louis in 1806 and Hannah in 1820. Like many Americans seeking opportunity, they had moved west into the then young state of Indiana, where they settled in Harrison County. Circled here is about where the Vaughn family had settled in Washington Township, very near to Scott Township. By 1860, he had 8 siblings, and the eldest of these was James A. Vaughn, his only older brother. A little more information about James here, since he likely would have served as an idol to George. He's his older brother. He probably looks up to him. James had enlisted in November of 1861 in the Company F, 49th Indiana, and after about a year of service with the regiment during November of 1862, James reportedly deserted his regiment without notifying his commander around Cincinnati, Ohio, and he had taken the opportunity to join the 2nd U.S. Artillery in Battery L, which was consolidated in May of that year with Battery B. And he went on to serve in all the major campaigns and battles of the Army of the Potomac from the end of 1862 on. George, however, would remain home. He was only 15 by the end of 1861, and it's likely his parents would not have permitted him to go off to war. And also, as the eldest son now still living with the family, he undoubtedly shared many of the responsibilities tending to the farm and homestead, helping to provide for his many other siblings. And it wouldn't be until June of 1863 that he would have his chance, now just 17 years old, to see military service. On June 17th, Thomas Hines' raiding party of 64 Confederates and what would later become known as Hines' Raid entered the state of Indiana between Rome and Derby. From here, their exact movements are unknown as they made their way north through Perry County and Crawford County into Orange, passing themselves off as on tax duty from the U.S. Army in search of deserters. They traded in their exhausted horses with local citizenry, give them forged vouchers in exchange, saying that they could turn those in at a local commissary officer, and etc. On the 18th, however, when they were passing through Valene, their ruse was discovered, and the alarm was sent throughout the countryside. Realizing by the time that they approached Paoli that the town was preparing for a defense and that they were likely now being pursued, Hines's men passed around the town, heading northeast. Northeast of Paoli, they encountered a band of men en route to town, and they'd captured them and shooting and injuring a man named James Sisk for refusing to give up his horse. By this time, they've noticed the word's quickly spreading. The local citizenry and home guard are onto them, and now they're being pursued. So they turn sharply, go to southeast towards Fredericksburg, and then roughly following the Blue River down south through Harrison and Crawford County towards Leavenworth. Word about the Confederates spreads fast, and on the 18th, word reaching Harrison County, George takes up arms to defend his home, and he immediately proceeds to Corydon to join the Scott Guard, a home guard company commanded by James Brackencarnes in the 6th Indiana Legion. The Scott Guards had been commanded by James for about 7 months this time. They were named so after Scott Township, from which most of the men held, about 50 in total. On June 19th, Captain Carnes' men would play a prominent role in the pursuit and capture of Hines' men at Upper Blue River Island. Shown here is a topography map of the location. On the top left, you can see Leavenworth, and in the Ohio River, you can see Blue River Island at the mouth of the Blue River, and Upper Blue River Island with a bit of a sandbar on it. To keep it short, Hines' men approach Leavenworth, deciding to avoid the town upon learning that hundreds of home guard are gathering there. They head east, crossing the Blue River into Harrison County, pressing a local in as a guide to try to ford the Ohio River. The local leads them astray a little bit, trying to buy for time. His son runs to Leavenworth to inform Home Guard and spread the word. And at this time, Home Guard's closing in on Hines and his men just about the time that they're reaching Upper Blue River Island. The Confederates think that they're about to get away, The Upper Blue River Island is much closer to the Indiana shore than it is the Kentucky shore, and it's fordable to that point. But once you get on the island, the river runs very deep and it runs very fast. So they get onto the island and they're whooping and cheering away. They think they've gotten away. Captain Carnes shows up with his men, his band of 50 men. Other Home Guard units show up and they invest the island. It is here that some of the Confederates try to cross the river and they realize it's just not going to happen. The men from Leavenworth have pressed a boat into their service with their cannon and they're approaching the island. And a brief firefight takes place, say for a couple of minutes. A few Confederates are killed, a few drown, most of them are captured. On screen now is the official report of Captain Carnes and another Indiana man, Captain John Callahan, to the Louisville Provost Guard, and at the end of it, it lists the prisoners, 54 in total, that were captured at the island. Now, after this, the Scott Guards are going to continue patrolling the riverside. There is a rumor spread over the weekend, the day after they've captured Hines' men on a Saturday and Sunday, that Indiana has been invaded again by 900 plus Confederate troops. A bunch of Home Guard mobilized, trying to defend from the new threat, and takes a while for word to get around that it's just a rumor and that nothing's actually happening. So tensions are very high at this point as they're patrolling the riverside. On June 23rd, 4 days after the capture of Hines's men at Blue River Island, while patrolling the riverside at about 6 o'clock in the morning, the Scott Guard tried to hail the steamer Minerva to shore. They fired a volley over her and she stopped, and when the captain asked what Carnes wanted, he replied that he wanted the Minerva landed. Unbeknownst to the steamer, Captain Carnes routinely tried to stop steamers coming up and down the river so he could get some news about what was happening over in Kentucky. Not liking the answer, and supposing that Captain Carnes was actually a band of guerrillas, given their lack of flag or any other distinguishable federal regalia, most of these men aren't uniformed, the captain of the steamboat ordered the boat to put on full steam to get away. And here accounts differ, but according to the Home Guard, they were fired upon by the Minerva, and they had once put a volley into her pilot house. And the Minerva retorted that, they didn't fire anything until they were fired at, and that they had no guns save for a hunting musket, and that when they were fired upon to halt, bullets had actually hit the pilot house, whizzing around the captain's head. A man on board picked up the hunting gun, and he shot at the Home Guard, and this shot killed George Vaughn, the only casualty of the event. He had been on active duty a mere 5 days before his tragic and needless death. "33 years later, in 1896, Lewis Vaughn, George's father, now a widower living in Missouri, sought to get a pension for his son's death during the war. At age 87, a pension would have potentially made all the difference in Mr. Vaughn's quality of life. It is unfortunate, however, that he was denied on the basis that George was never called into service under the United States government, nor did he die under the service of an officer of the United States government. Lewis would go on to live until 1906, passing away a centurion at the age of 100. His application for a pension will forever record details of George's life. "50 years later, to the week of George's death, in the 1913 edition of the Corydon Democrat, John L. Brandenburg recounted his experience in the Scott Guard to the paper's correspondent. He totaled the Scott Guard's role during the Hines Raid and the capture of one of Hines's men after the raid by local citizenry, including Lewis Vaughn, George's father. He also saw fit to tell of George Vaughn, quoting the paper now. Mr. Brandenburg told us about George Vaughn being killed by a shot from a passing boat. Captain Carnes and about 50 of his men were lined up along the water's edge, and pursuant to orders, when a boat came along, Captain Carnes ordered it to come to shore to bring him news of the war. And the captain of the boat responded, "Go to hell," when Captain Carnes' men fired on the boat. The fire was returned, and George Vaughn, one of the Scott guards, was killed. When an attempt was made to punish those on board for the killing of Vaughn, they made a successful defense by proving that Captain Carnes and his men displayed no flag, and the boat crew thought they were Confederates trying to get possession of the boat. George's short service and untimely death is not known to many, and his memory largely forgotten. If not for Lewis Vaughn applying for a pension, we would know even less about his service. Mr. Brandenburg, even 50 years later, sought to tell of George while recounting his story. Like his father and Mr. Brandenburg, trying to keep George's memory alive, let this serve as an example to all of us as we strive to keep green the memory of the boys in blue. George may not have been in uniform, but he met the call of his country and community when he took up arms to defend home and tragically made the ultimate sacrifice. I think George's story is worth remembering. Just a short epilogue here. There is a discrepancy in the dates of his death. The newspaper reports the event as having taken place on June 23rd. His pension file by his father 33 years later reports that it took place on June 20th, and his headstone reads July 13th. I think the evidence supports that it was either June 20th or June 23rd. I lean June 23rd. I think the newspaper is probably more accurate than the other sources, and also that this is by no means a complete account of Hines' raid or a lot of other details in this. So, thanks for listening and have a good day.